He did it right after I stumbled on the word a star strategy. My boss, Mr. Harrison, tilted his head to the side and mimicked the catch in my voice. The room went silent for a heartbeat, then nervous laughter rippled through the conference space. I stood there frozen, the presentation clicker trembling in my sweaty palm. The projector hummed behind me, casting my carefully prepared slides onto the white wall. Someone had made burnt coffee earlier, and the bitter smell hung in the air like a bad memory. "Go on, Penny," Mr. Harrison said, leaning back in his leather chair with a smirk pulling at his mouth. "If you can get it out, that is." More laughter. Quieter this time, but still there. My throat felt like someone had wrapped their hands around it and squeezed. I could feel my face burning hot, the kind of heat that starts at your neck and crawls up to your ears. I wanted to disappear into the carpet. Then something happened. A chair scraped loudly against the floor on the client side of the table. Someone stood up. My eyes lifted from the floor, and I saw the client lead staring directly at Mr. Harrison with an expression I couldn't quite read. The laughter died completely. "My name is Penny Reynolds." I counted 3 deep breaths before I spoke again, treating each inhale like a careful step across ice that might crack beneath me. "My name is Penny," I said, forcing the words out steady and clear. "I stutter. I'm also the person who built the entire plan you hired our company to present today." The client lead, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and gray hair at his temples, nodded once. His voice was firm when he spoke. "We're listening, Miss Reynolds. Please continue." I glanced at Mr. Harrison. He had gone completely still, his pen frozen halfway through tapping against his notepad. The smirk had vanished from his face, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. His eyes darted between me and the client, trying to figure out what had just shifted in the room. I clicked to the next slide. My hand didn't shake this time. Something had changed inside me too. Something that felt like a door opening after years of being locked. Tonight would be the night I stopped apologizing for simply existing in a world that didn't always have patience for people like me. I didn't sound perfect when I continued the presentation. My voice caught twice more on difficult consonants, and I had to pause and restart a sentence about quarterly projections. But I sounded real. I sounded human. I slowed my pace deliberately, let the story behind our strategy breathe and unfold naturally. I let the results speak for themselves instead of rushing to prove something. The graphs were clean and easy to understand. The rollout dates were realistic and achievable. The cost savings were undeniable, backed by solid data from 3 comparable case studies. I walked them through every phase with confidence I didn't know I possessed. When I clicked to the final summary slide, I felt something like relief wash through my chest. "Thank you, Penny," the client lead said, clasping his hands together on the table. His expression was warm, almost proud. That was exceptionally clear. Harrison reached for his leather portfolio, ready to jump in and reclaim control of the room like he always did. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to add his own commentary and take credit for my work. But the client lead held up one hand to stop him. "Actually, Mr. Harrison, we'd like to continue this conversation with Ms. Reynolds, without you." They moved us to a smaller glass-walled conference room down the hall. Just me, the client lead, and 2 other members of their executive team. The walls were transparent, and I could see other office workers passing by outside, carrying coffee cups and folders, completely unaware of what was happening inside this quiet space. The client lead set his phone carefully on the polished table between us. He looked at me for a long moment, then spoke in a voice that was quieter than before. "My son stutters," he said. The words hung in the air between us. "He's 14. I don't let anyone make it a punchline. Not in my house, and certainly not in my business relationships." He picked up his phone and started composing an email right there in front of me. His thumbs moved quickly across the screen. "I'm writing to your CEO, he explained, glancing up. "I'm going to CC you on this. We're pausing our contract until 3 things happen. First, a written apology from Mr. Harrison. Second, mandatory leadership training for your management team. Third, you installed as our account lead moving forward." He added people from procurement and legal to the message before hitting send. My pulse, which had been racing since the presentation started, finally began to slow. Then I remembered something. Something I kept in my desk drawer at the office. 3 months of notes. That's what I had collected. Starting the first week, Mr. Harrison became my supervisor. Dates, times, witnesses present, exact phrases that burned when I heard them. Things like "he's just stuck again," said while I stood 5 feet away. "Do we have a translator?" when I took too long forming a word. "Is this contagious?" followed by laughter during a team meeting. I had gone to HR once, back in September. The woman behind the desk, someone named Brenda with tired eyes and fake sympathy, had called it unfortunate humor. She said Mr. Harrison was old school and didn't mean any real harm. She suggested I develop thicker skin. I left her office feeling smaller than when I walked in. But I kept taking notes anyway. Every single incident, logged with details a lawyer would appreciate. I had been too afraid to do anything with that file. Too worried about being labeled difficult or overly sensitive or unable to take a joke. Now, sitting in this glass room with a client who actually saw me as a person worth defending, I pulled out my phone. I forwarded the entire document to the CEO's chief of staff before fear could convince me to delete it instead. My phone buzzed 30 seconds later. "Received. We're reviewing immediately." By the time I arrived at work the next morning, Mr. Harrison had already constructed a new version of yesterday's events. I heard him telling someone in the break room, his voice carrying through the thin walls. He was just lightening the mood during a tense presentation. He was trying to help me relax and break the ice with humor. He made it sound almost noble, like he'd been doing me a favor. He cornered me near the coffee station around 9:30, stepping close enough that I could smell his cologne. It was too strong, like he'd applied it in a rush. "You're blowing this completely out of proportion, Penny," he whispered, trying to sound reasonable and concerned. "We're a team here. You know I didn't mean anything by it." I watched his jaw flex as he spoke, watched him practice empathy like it was a foreign language he'd only just learned yesterday. He wasn't sorry. He was scared. There's a difference, and I could see it written clearly across his face. My inbox pinged on my phone, a calendar invitation with red priority marking. Leadership meeting at 10 a.m. Mandatory attendance required. I turned the screen so he could see the subject line. His face went pale. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something else, but nothing came out. I walked away without responding. We gathered around the executive conference table at exactly 10 o'clock. The nameplate in front of each chair looked like small gravestones, marking territory. The CEO, Mr. Brennan, sat at the head of the table. He looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight, with new lines around his eyes and mouth that I didn't remember seeing before. "We're at serious risk of losing a major account," he said without preamble. "I want to understand what happened yesterday." Mr. Harrison started talking immediately, launching into his prepared defense. But the head of procurement, a sharp woman named Miss Torres, cut him off mid-sentence. "They're not bluffing, Harrison. I've seen the email. They've already frozen the next payment milestone." The HR director, a different person than the one I'd spoken to before, opened a folder. She began reading my notes aloud in a flat, professional voice. Each incident, each date, each witness. Harrison's own words sounded so much worse when someone else owned them, when they were stripped of his joking tone and laid out bare under fluorescent lights. Mr. Brennan turned his attention to me. His eyes were serious, maybe even kind. "Penny, would you accept the position of account lead for this client, effective immediately?" The room held its breath. I didn't hesitate the way I might have a week ago. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady and clear. "But I need written commitments first." I'd spent half the night awake, staring at my ceiling, thinking through exactly what I needed to say in this moment. "Mandatory training on disability awareness and workplace respect for all management-level staff," I said, ticking items off mentally. A formal written apology from Mr. Harrison. Not one of those non-apology apologies that says if anyone was offended. And clear anti-retaliation language in writing that protects me and anyone else who speaks up in the future. I could see Mr. Harrison across the table, his fingers drumming against his leg, counting the cost behind his calculating eyes. He was doing math in his head, trying to figure out how to salvage his position and his reputation. The CEO nodded slowly, processing my requests. "Done," he said simply. "All of it. You have my word, and you'll have it in writing by end of day." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. His smile didn't reach his eyes when he spoke. "I'd appreciate the chance to make amends directly," he said. "To show Penny and the team that I'm committed to growth." The words were right, but they sounded hollow, like reading from a script someone else had written. His email landed in my inbox exactly 1 hour later. I was at my desk, trying to focus on actual work, when the notification popped up. "I'm sorry if my humor made you uncomfortable during yesterday's presentation," the email read. "It was never my intention to cause distress." I stared at that word, "if," as though my discomfort was theoretical, something that might or might not have occurred depending on how you looked at it, as though his intention somehow erased the impact of his actions. I hit reply all before I could second-guess myself. "Please remove the word 'if' from your apology," I wrote. Facts don't need conditional statements. I was uncomfortable. The client was offended. These things happened. The silence that followed stretched so long I could hear my own heartbeat pulsing in my ears. I refreshed my email 3 times, wondering if I'd gone too far, if I'd be labeled as difficult and ungracious. Then a new message appeared. Shorter this time. Cleaner. "I'm sorry for mocking your stutter during yesterday's presentation. My behavior was unprofessional and hurtful. It won't happen again." I took a screenshot of both emails. Then I added them to my ongoing documentation file, just in case I needed them later. Some part of me knew this wasn't over yet. I took the next client call alone 3 days later. The conference room smelled like dry erase markers and the lemon-scented wipes the cleaning crew used on the tables. I'd arrived 15 minutes early to set up my laptop and review my notes one final time. My hands were shaking slightly when I dialed into the video conference. Halfway through my update on project timelines, my voice caught hard on the word "ska scaling." I felt the old panic rising in my chest, the familiar fear that I was wasting everyone's time, that they were all silently judging me. But I forced myself to pause. I took a breath. I finished the sentence at my own pace. Nobody jumped in to rescue me or finish my words. Nobody made a joke or rolled their eyes. They just waited patiently, like professional adults who respected the human being speaking to them. When I finished my thought, the client lead unmuted himself. "Perfect pacing, Miss Reynolds," he said warmly. "Don't rush your brilliance. We'd rather wait an extra second and get the full value of your thinking." I stared at the blinking cursor in the chat box where his message appeared. I read it 3 times, letting those words soak into my bones like warm sunlight after a long winter. This was what respect felt like. The retaliation started small. At 6 o'clock on Friday evening, an HR calendar invitation appeared in my inbox with an ominous subject line, "Performance Check-In Discussion." There was a document attached, supposedly a routine evaluation form, but when I opened it, I saw words that made my stomach drop. Emotionally reactive in high-pressure situations? One section read, "Overly dependent on client validation rather than internal leadership guidance," said another. "May struggle with objectivity when personal matters intersect with professional duties." I recognized Mr. Harrison's writing style immediately, even though his name wasn't anywhere on the document. The passive-aggressive corporate speak was his signature, dressed up in HR linen to look official and neutral. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, fighting the urge to cry or scream or both. Then I opened my laptop. I created a detailed timeline showing exactly when this evaluation appeared, less than a week after I'd made formal complaints and been promoted over Mr. Harrison's objections. I attached screenshots of the client's enthusiastic praise. I CC'd the legal department with a simple subject line, "Documentation of apparent retaliation." "Retaliation is actionable under employment law," I wrote in the email body. My hands only shook a little while typing. Then I hit send and drove home in silence. 2 of my teammates reached out separately over the weekend. First Sophie on Saturday morning, then Kyle on Sunday afternoon. Both messages said essentially the same thing. "I'll speak up if you need witnesses. I'll tell them what really happened." They had both been in the presentation room when Mr. Harrison mocked me. They'd both heard his words, seen my face turn red, watched the client react with anger. They remembered the uncomfortable laughter that had rippled through the space. And they both admitted something that must have cost them to say. They had laughed too. Quietly, nervously, but they'd laughed. They hated themselves for it now. I added their written statements to my growing file, documenting their willingness to testify if needed. I thanked them both without making them confess more than they could emotionally carry. Some guilt was theirs to process on their own time. I wasn't their therapist or their priest, but I appreciated their courage in coming forward now, even if it was late. That night at home, I made chamomile tea and stood at my kitchen counter practicing words in the mirror. "This stops now," I said to my reflection. Then again, louder. "This stops now." I needed to believe it before I could make anyone else believe it. Mr. Harrison tried a grand gesture on Monday morning. An all-hands email memo about respect and resilience in the workplace appeared in everyone's inbox at 8 a.m. sharp. He quoted a TED Talk about empathy that he'd probably watched at double speed. He linked to a podcast episode about inclusive leadership that I doubted he'd actually listened to. The whole thing read like a book report, written by someone who'd only skimmed the chapter summaries. People responded with the kind of enthusiastic keyboard applause that means absolutely nothing. Lots of reply-all messages saying, "Great perspective," and "Thanks for sharing," the digital equivalent of polite golf claps. Everyone was performing their approval for the record. Then the client lead replied all to the entire thread, and the temperature in the room changed instantly. "We appreciate the reading recommendations," his email said with barely concealed disdain. "However, we prefer concrete actions over philosophical aphorisms. Please refer to the written requirements we've already submitted to your executive team." The conversation died immediately in the group chat, like a birthday balloon hitting a ceiling fan. Nobody replied after that. The memo just sat there in everyone's inbox, suddenly looking foolish and performative instead of thoughtful and enlightened. I allowed myself a small smile. The procurement and compliance departments scheduled a formal review meeting for Tuesday afternoon. They asked Mr. Harrison to walk them through the joking culture within his team, to explain how humor functioned in our day-to-day work environment. I was invited to attend as a witness and stakeholder. He fumbled through his answers, sweat beading visibly at his temples, even though the conference room was cold. He kept starting sentences and abandoning them halfway through. "Well, you see, the thing is, and in my experience, teams that can laugh together." He was suddenly fluent in denial, in rewriting history, in painting himself as misunderstood rather than harmful. When my turn came, I presented my documentation log like an accountant showing a budget spreadsheet. Facts arranged in neat rows, dates in one column, incidents in another, witnesses in a third. Harm quantified and underlined with actual examples that nobody could spin or reinterpret. The numbers told a story that didn't need embellishment. "Thank you, Miss Reynolds," the compliance lead said, closing her folder with a decisive snap. "This is extremely thorough. We'll update executive leadership with our findings by end of business today." Her voice was neutral, but I caught something in her expression that looked almost like respect. By noon on Wednesday, I received an official email from HR with my new title and responsibilities. Account Lead, Strategic Client Relations, effective immediately. The salary increase was significant, the kind of jump that usually took years to achieve through normal promotion cycles. But it wasn't a gift or a favor. It was what I should have been paid all along for the work I was actually doing. Mr. Harrison was temporarily removed from client-facing responsibilities pending the outcome of an ongoing investigation. Corporate speak for being fired in slow motion. I watched from my desk as he wheeled a cardboard box past my workspace without looking in my direction. His shoulders were hunched forward, his tie loosened, his usual confidence completely gone. Inside the box, I could see a glass paperweight sitting on top of his other belongings. It wobbled with each step like a tiny planet losing its orbit, threatening to roll off and shatter on the floor. He didn't say goodbye to anyone. He didn't need to. His absence said everything that needed saying. The office felt different after he left. Lighter somehow, like we'd all been holding our breath underwater and finally surfaced. I met with the full client team at their downtown office building the following week. We took over their largest conference room, covering the walls with color-coded Post-it notes and filling the whiteboard with diagrams and timelines. We chopped out unnecessary features that had been padding the project scope. We simplified the implementation path, removing steps that only existed to justify billable hours. We pulled a risky launch date back by 2 full weeks to give ourselves breathing room. It felt like clearing an overgrown hiking trail that nobody had maintained in years. Hard work, satisfying work, necessary work. When my voice snagged on certain words, I simply switched to drawing what I meant on the whiteboard instead. The room leaned in closer anyway, following my marker as I sketched out process flows and decision trees. "This is the best planning meeting we've had with your firm in 18 months, the client lead told me afterward. Maybe ever." He shook my hand firmly at the door. That night, he sent a 1-sentence email to my CEO with me copied. "Miss Reynolds is exactly the partner we needed." I printed that email and pinned it to my cubicle wall. Some days you need visible proof that you're not crazy, that your work actually matters. An anonymous comment appeared on my internal company profile page the next morning. Just a single line, not leadership material. An hour later, another appeared below it. "Only got the role by playing victim. Expect performance issues soon." The phrasing felt familiar, not in specifics, but in tone. Petty, performative, close to home in a way that made my skin crawl. I took screenshots with timestamps, logged the dates in my ongoing documentation file, and refused to feed the anonymous troll by responding publicly. Then I noticed something small but significant, a pattern in the usernames. The anonymous accounts had similar structures, random words followed by number sequences, but one of them ended in 77. I remembered Mr. Harrison making a joke once about his lucky number being 77, something about the year he graduated college. It was a tiny detail, easily overlooked. But I don't overlook details anymore. I did some quiet searching through old company Slack archives, found an ancient thread where Mr. Harrison had used Harrison77 as his handle for a long-forgotten fantasy football league. The number wasn't proof by itself, but it was a thread worth pulling. I saved everything to my file and waited. That evening, I found something else. On an industry forum where people gossiped about tech companies and consultants, a brand new account had posted a detailed recap of our situation. "Major client bullied our firm into promoting mediocre project manager. Expect delays and quality issues within 60 days. The account name was StratLeader77. My hands went cold when I saw it. The writing style matched Mr. Harrison's perfectly. The same corporate buzzwords, the same condescending tone, the same obsession with hierarchy and credentials. And there was that number again, 77. His signature, his calling card, his inability to let go. I didn't chase him into that forum or try to argue with the post. That would have been messy and unprovable. Instead, I took clear screenshots showing the username, the timestamp, the full content of his claims. I compiled the evidence linking StratLeader77 to previous usernames Mr. Harrison had used. Then I forwarded everything to our legal team with context they needed to understand the pattern. By morning, the forum post had disappeared completely, but my legal contact hadn't. She sent me a brief message. "We're handling this. Don't worry." The investigation expanded in directions I hadn't anticipated. Compliance didn't just look at workplace behavior anymore. They started examining vendor relationships, consulting agreements, expense reports that hadn't been properly documented, numbers that should have added up cleanly, but instead created strange gaps and inconsistencies. I hadn't gone hunting for this information, but I'd seen things over the months that never quite made sense. Friendly consultants who showed up for meetings but never seemed to produce deliverables. Hourly rates that made my eyes blink in confusion. $400 an hour for what exactly? Expense reports for client dinners at restaurants that didn't exist or had closed years ago. I simply handed over the threads I'd noticed, but never tugged on myself. The auditors took those loose ends and pulled hard. What unraveled looked like a cheap sweater in rough hands. Holes appearing everywhere. The whole structure falling apart with just a bit of pressure. Turns out Mr. Harrison had been running several side arrangements that benefited him personally, while technically billing clients through our company. The more they looked, the worse it got. I stopped being surprised by the daily revelations and just felt tired. A calendar invitation appeared in my inbox marked Consequences Meeting. It was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. with senior leadership and legal counsel required. I knew what that meant. The investigation had reached its conclusion. But 2 minutes before that meeting started, a completely different invitation landed in my personal email account. The subject line read, "Career Opportunity." It was from the client lead, sent to my personal address somehow, asking if I would consider bringing my skills in-house to lead their initiatives directly as an employee rather than a contractor. I clicked through to the job description, my heart pounding harder with each sentence. The pay range was 30% higher than my new salary. The benefits package was extraordinary. The work culture emphasized respect, patience, and judging people by their contributions rather than their presentation style. Everything was spelled out clearly, professionally, respectfully. I left both emails open on my screen, consequences on one side, career opportunity on the other. Then I joined the first meeting with my camera off and my microphone muted, simply listening to what would happen next. The findings were read aloud slowly, like a eulogy nobody wanted to deliver, but everyone knew was necessary. Not just the workplace mockery and disability discrimination. Also, conflicts of interest, mishandled vendor referrals, sloppy financial oversight, falsified expense reports, possible kickback arrangements. Each revelation worse than the last, painting a picture of someone who'd been taking advantage of trust for years. Mr. Harrison tried 3 different strategies in 20 minutes. First, he bargained, offering to make restitution and accept a demotion. Then he blustered, threatening legal action for defamation and unfair treatment. Finally, he pleaded, his voice cracking, talking about his mortgage and his kids' college tuition and his decades of service. None of it worked. The evidence was too clear, too documented, too damning. By the end of the meeting, his company laptop was surrendered across the table. His security badge was deactivated remotely while we all sat there. His access to email and internal systems was terminated. He looked up once, eyes scanning the room desperately, searching for an ally or a sympathetic face. Everyone looked down at their notes instead. The meeting ended with a simple statement. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Afterward, the CEO asked if I would stay behind for a private conversation. Just the 2 of us in his corner office with windows overlooking the city. He looked older up close, tired in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. We failed you, Mr. Brennan said directly. No corporate hedging, no softening language. I failed you. We should have acted the first time you went to HR. We should have created an environment where you never had to document months of abuse just to be believed. He paused, choosing his words carefully. We're instituting mandatory training across all levels. We're also making a $50,000 donation to a speech and communications nonprofit in your name. It's not enough, but it's a start. I appreciated the gesture. It felt genuine. Then I told him about the client's offer, watching his face carefully for his reaction. They've asked me to join their team directly, I said. Better pay, better culture, better alignment with what I actually want to do with my career. He swallowed visibly. We'd like you to stay, Penny. Whatever you want. Name the terms, and I'll make it happen. For the first time in my entire career at this company, I had actual leverage. For the first time, I let myself negotiate without apologizing. The decision wasn't about punishment anymore, wasn't about revenge or making anyone suffer for what they'd done to me. It was about breathing clean air again, about choosing a future that didn't require constant vigilance and armor. The client's offer represented something I'd never experienced in my professional life. A workplace where I could just do my job without fighting for basic respect first. I accepted their position with 2 conditions of my own. First, remote work flexibility for days when my speech felt particularly difficult. Second, they would fund a scholarship program for young professionals with speech differences or disabilities who wanted to enter the business world. I wanted to build something that would help people like me years down the road. They said yes to both requests without hesitation. Those terms are actually improvements to our initial offer, the client lead told me over the phone. You're already thinking like someone who belongs on our leadership team. I pressed my pen to the signature line on the contract and felt the full weight of my own hand. This was my choice, my path. My decision made freely without fear or coercion. That feeling alone was worth more than any salary increase. On my last day at the old firm, I cleaned out my desk methodically. I left a neat stack of documents in the center of my workspace where anyone could see them. My complete documentation log, the apology emails, the new training schedule the company had implemented, the announcement about the scholarship fund and nonprofit donation. On top of the stack, I placed a single yellow post-it note with words I'd thought about for days. A voice that wavers can still move mountains. In the elevator going down to the lobby for the last time, I caught my reflection in the polished metal doors. I looked tired, my eyes soft around the edges, my hair slightly messy from the afternoon humidity. But I didn't look broken. I looked like someone who'd survived something difficult and come out standing. Downstairs in the lobby, the client lead was waiting with 2 coffee cups and a small genuine smile. He'd driven over personally to meet me, to walk me out of one chapter and into the next. "Ready?" he asked, offering me one of the cups. I took it, feeling the warmth through the cardboard sleeve. "I'm ready." A month later, our first major project milestone shipped exactly on schedule, slightly under budget, and completely drama-free. No emergencies, no crisis meetings at midnight, no panic about missed deadlines. Just good work done by professionals who respected each other. I stood in the company town hall presenting our results to the broader team. My voice caught twice during the presentation. I paused both times, took a breath, and continued when I was ready. Nobody flinched at my pauses. They just waited like people who respect human beings, who understand that communication happens at different speeds, who value substance over style. That evening, an email arrived from a young analyst I'd never met who worked in a completely different department. "I stutter too," she wrote. "I've been hiding it for 2 years, afraid someone would think I wasn't capable. Seeing you lead our biggest project launch changed something in me. Thank you for being visible." I closed my laptop slowly, feeling tears build in my eyes. But these were different tears than I'd cried before. Not tears of shame or frustration or powerlessness. These were the good kind, the kind that tastes like coming home after a long journey, the kind that mean you finally found a place where you can breathe freely and be exactly who you are.